Hey everybody, my name is Dieter Bone from TreoCentral.com, and we're going to present to you today some video clips from the Digital Life Conference last week. We're of course going to start out by showing you some hands-on work with the Treo 680 from Palm, and then we're going to have an interview with the product manager, Phil McClendon, so stick around, it should be a good time. So let's get started with some general stuff. Here it is, the Palm Treo 680, a GSM quad band Treo, which means it should work all over the world. In America, it would be Singular and T-Mobile, although Palm hasn't announced any carrier relationships yet. You're looking at the hand of Michael Ducker holding the red Treo 680. There's also a white, a graphite, and a copper-colored one. My personal favorite is the copper. Michael liked the red one. In any case, I want to mention that in the interview was myself and, of course, Michael Ducker and the owner of TreoCentral, Marcus Adolson. We were also very lucky to have Andrew Carton of TreoNauts and Christopher Mink, I'm slaughtering your last name, Christopher, I'm sorry, from Everything Treo. And we got a chance to sit down with Phil McClendon, who's the product manager here. We're just taking a quick look right now at the phone app, which is all new on the Treo 680. We're going to go into a little bit more detail later on the new features of that. Also, in a second here, you're going to see us go to the new application screen, where you'll see that there's a new Google Maps application. There's also a new application to automatically set up wired car kits, which is pretty convenient and a nice little feature. So anyway, I think next up we're going to take a look at the new conference calling features, which besides the phone app is the big new setup on the Treo 680. Let's take a listen.
Group conference. Mute.
Group conference.
Extract a call.
Ooh.
Ooh.
That is slick.
And then you're back. Oh, finally.
Now can you hang up on the one that's on hold?
Yeah, that's the the hang up always.
How do I hang? I don't have a hang up button anymore.
Yeah.
But missing is the hang up button. And as a touchscreen feature, for me, I've always used that button. I've never used the hardware hang up button. Is that something that I'm just a weird user for doing? Or
well, what we tried to do was make this even more like a phone, and many phones leverage the send and the end key, and so that's how we look to differentiate ourselves. Not differentiate ourselves, but improve the experience, I should say. And with a hang up button on the screen too, you have people with large earlobes, earrings, and so forth hanging up their calls. Now they could turn off the touch screen and so forth, but that wasn't necessarily something.
So here's the big new software feature of the Treo 680, the all-new phone app. There's 5 main tabs there, as you can see. The first one is, of course, the wallpaper screen, where you can see recent messages and even recent calendar appointments if you want. And it's pretty nice. You can set up your own custom picture there. The new favorites part of the phone app is much cleaner. It's a single vertical list instead of the wide horizontal lists as you're seeing here on the 700p. So much easier to configure, much easier to use. Of course, favorites work the same that you'd expect them to. You can organize them in any order that you want. Like the other Palm OS favorites, you can set the shortcuts to go to a speed dial, or to text somebody, or to go to an application, or any of the above, which is I think a big advantage that the Palm OS has over Windows Mobile. Anyway, move on. Here's a dial pad. It's exactly what you'd think a dial pad would be. Pretty simple and straightforward. Now, Contacts is no longer a separate application. It's actually integrated into the phone app, which I think is a really big step forward. It's all this stuff is going to be just part of the phone now. You don't have to think about going into a separate application to find it. They moved the contacts drop list to the upper left there, but otherwise there's not really a whole lot of differences there. Pretty much what you'd expect from a contacts app. And then of course the last one is the call log, and you can go through and look at details and so on and so forth. And then one last little software thing we want to note here: if you hold down the home button, it shows you a list of recent apps, which is pretty slick. And we'll give you one last look at the Treo, the SD card slot on the side, just so you can see how that works. And then we're going to move on to our interview with Phil McClendon. Here we go.
For me is sizing.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear more detail about what kind of decision process went into what made you choose to continue to keep the same.
Sure, the casing size.
Casing size as the previous Treos have been for 3 years.
Sure. Well, it is definitely, the volume is definitely smaller on the device, but we didn't want to make the trade-off in going to a much smaller battery than we already did. This is a This is, a 1/3 step down from the size of the battery of the 700p and so forth. We didn't want to go even further because the thing is, it is important for us to get a full day's use. But, when you look at standby and talk numbers, those are pure talk and pure standby numbers. So it's really hard to quote a mixed usage number, but we said, hey, for a user who's doing a variety of different things, they've got to get a full day out of it. So we weren't willing to compromise on that. In addition, we wanted to, from the width, from the X and Y dimensions and so forth, we had to keep it so that people even with big thumbs can get around this keyboard. If you take a look at the chiclet keyboard on the Pearl and so that, it's very difficult to use. The roller key is a great gimmick and stuff like that, but get some grease on your finger and I'm sure it'll go the way of most mice did. So, we had to make sure that the buttons were big enough such that people could use it. It wasn't, children and women with small hands could be the ones to use it effectively.
What made you decide not to go the other direction and make it wider like some of the
Well, because what we did is if you feel this in your hand, you give them the variety of the different hands, it feels good. Whereas you get the Q and it's or the E62 and it's kind of toasterish. It's rather big. And so we want the combination of the right X and Y dimension, but that also means in terms of board space and so forth, you've got to go a little deeper.
Right.
And we did some of the sculpting along the back.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, what are some of the other different components that lead to the Z stack up? The full SD card slot accessible from the side or from the external without having to pop the battery and so forth. We felt that full SD was really the way to go on this device because this demographic we're going after who have a digital camera and so forth, they can find an SD card somewhere. Mini SD and micro SD are available, but they're for a higher end user who's more sophisticated and so forth.
Just a couple of quick questions. Competing in the feature phone space.
Yep.
We don't know the price point yet,
Mm-hmm.
so that'll be interesting to see. There's still some basic things that we feel are lacking, such as Bluetooth voice dialing.
Okay.
Anyone moving from a feature phone today into this device are going to expect that. We get plenty of calls about that every
Sure.
week. Why are things not? And this is now the 5th generation, I
Mm-hmm.
guess the 3rd generation with Bluetooth.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that not a priority? I mean, is it not seen as something people want, or I don't?
Well, there's a couple of different questions there. So, I wouldn't say we're competing in the feature phone space. What we're doing is we are bringing the smartphone space lower and closer to the feature phone demographic. We're attracting people from the feature phones to the smartphone device. And I like to say, many of these feature phones have different items and functionality that our device does, but on our device you can actually use those features. MMS on a 9-key phone and so forth, or a 12-key phone, compared to on this device is a very different experience. Same with SMS and so forth. So we're bringing that smartphone user demographic closer to the feature phone. We're giving them the ability to actually use these features, so bringing those feature phone users up. Now, in terms of things like Bluetooth voice dialing, currently, we still have some limitations on our software that prevent us from being able to do that. We have heard that same feedback and certainly listened to it, and we incorporate all kinds of user feedback into maintenance releases that we do, as well as future product updates.
I mean, it just seems like a basic Motorola real-time operating system can easily handle it. 312 megahertz into
Mm-hmm.
there would seem like there would be somewhere some overhead left to sneak
Sure.
that in.
Well, it's with our device as compared to many other devices, especially feature phone handsets, we're a dual processor device. So it's not as much to do with the overhead of the processor, but it has to do with the interaction, the software between the radio chipset and the host processor. What is a host process versus a radio process? As well as, working with the Palm OS and other trade-offs we have to make with our Bluetooth stack and compatibility and choosing what things we do enable and what things we don't enable together.
How much hardware development was shared on the 750B, especially when it comes to tooling?
Well, I would say that there's a lot of mechanical designs shared, but the ODMs are different between the two,
Okay.
and so I would say a lot of the Palm internal design work was similar.
Why not have a black one? Because obviously with the limited emission black, a lot of people are set on the black, and you know, the standard one is not necessarily that different from the existing one.
Well, so the standard graphite color is, you know, is a nice neutral color that has done very well and a lot of people are very attracted to. Black is another color, is something that we've come very close to black with the 750V,
Sure.
and then there's the black tie edition and so forth. We didn't want to do yet a Me Too, like another spin. We wanted to do something that was a little bit different. That doesn't mean that in the future we couldn't do a black or, you know, or a purple or a pink,
So
you know.
pink razor is wildly popular. I was very surprised.
Exactly. What the reason and the way we chose these different colors was, okay, let's come out with a color that is consistent with Palm's design philosophy, so it doesn't feel like we went out and took a bunch of cases and spray painted them. So it's something that's still elegant and attractive, and is not such a wild departure, such people go, oh my gosh, where did that come from?
Will the unlocked version be launching first, or is it going to be a carrier launch first?
It's to be determined in terms of what exits certification first.
Will there be an unlocked version?
Yes, there will be. And the colors will only be available as unlocked from palm.com and from retail.
Carrier will have their own specific color.
Yeah, they'll have,
multiple colors or just one?
yeah, nothing.
Were the carriers given the option to carry the colors? Because I think that's just a really, I mean, this is what one of the things that's really unique about this product is the rollout of the colors and the promotion of the colors and a more consumer phone, similar to, you know, the line of iPods.
Yep.
Necessarily, somebody won't be able to walk into a T-Mobile or
Mhm.
a Singular store and, you know, view those colors and
Sure.
yet another grab, another reason why they might pick up a Treo as opposed to picking
Sure.
up another silver phone.
Well, they have to, whenever a carrier looks at a lineup of products, they have to weigh against all the other products that they have that we don't actually even know about in many cases. Excuse me. And so, I mean, when we go into a different carrier, depending on our relationship with a carrier, we offer them quite a bit of customization. And sometimes they choose to take us up on it, sometimes they don't. But if you take a look at the Razor, they launched with black, and then I think they went to silver, and then they went to pink. So they take a very cautious approach from a color perspective, especially in this category, I would say, because this is kind of a new thing in this category, and they think inventory dollars. And it's like, oh my gosh, all these different SKUs. So, you know, if a tier one were to come to us and say, you know, here's a PO for 1 million units or something like that, I'm sure we can make it polka dots if they wanted it. Yeah, I mean.
One thing I'm surprised at in our new phone interface is that we still don't see features that are heralded on the Windows Mobile Trios as a great Palm experience. I'm talking specifically about photo dial and Google search from a main screen. Why are you not bringing that into Palm? Is there a reason?
I believe there are some technical limitations. I can't speak to them, in particular in terms of how the Today screen is handled in Windows Mobile. But also there are some innovations that we want to leave on Windows Mobile. So there is some differentiation. We don't want to make it so that it's just, you know, this or that. So it's a combination of those two.
Let's talk about the server client perspective. You know, this kind of steps on the toes of the Sidekick. You know,
Yeah.
they have a very nice server client infrastructure set up for the end user. You know, it's very much, I would say, cartoonish, but you know, you manage it all over the web, you update it there, it updates live on the phone.
Yeah.
Yep.
That layer is missing, as far as we know. Does it ship with the standard, boring Palm desktop? Are there any? Is that service layer something you guys looked at? You know, trying to make this more advanced plane to consumers?
I mean, I can't speak to what our future plans are. Yes, we do have the Palm desktop, but I wouldn't call it boring. It's faithful, well tested.
I think people have some corrupt.
Yeah.
Run on Mac OS.
I mean, the same integration with Outlook and so forth. So those particular features we will keep and so forth. We will continually look to innovate. You know, we've obviously worked with partners that do have, you know, server client infrastructure in place where they play and experiment there. You can see that as we expand more with Exchange ActiveSync, that's more integration on the server side, and you'll continue to see innovations from us in that area.
Since you work with Google to help bring Google Maps to Palm, is that same invitation been extended to Yahoo?
And we work with a whole variety of different players. I mean, many of the different brands that you saw that we posted up there, we do have workings with development as well as marketing. So, I mean, I can't comment on future developments and stuff like that, but it's to our advantage to integrate more and more with partners like that to differentiate ourselves. I mean, we've never been sort of the route that, like HTC, where you take hardware, you slap a basic OS, and you throw a logo on it and ship it out there. I mean, what we try and do is give, I mean, and they do very well with speeds and feeds on, and they make great hardware. Don't get me wrong, but what we try and do is differentiate ourselves from the integration perspective of the applications.
Have either Yahoo or Google expressed an interest in developing an MVNO around the Treo?
Not that I can comment on.
One thing that I know, and I know this isn't the target demographics, but Treo 650 users, most likely will upgrade to this device, especially the GSM owners.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
don't have another option.
Absolutely.
What was the decision to stick with the VGA camera versus going to the same camera in the?
It's, I mean, I would say that the camera, it is still a VGA camera, but the low light performance has been improved, but also it is a cost trade-off. We wanted to provide a camera or a phone that was designed for a lower price point.
But wouldn't it?
200. Yeah.
And we'll find out what the price point is going to be. But it would seem like for the consumer you're targeting the device for, 32 megabytes would be plenty. They would, I mean, because now we're shifting everything around. We love 64 megabytes, 128 megabytes. But it would seem like for Joe Blow, he wouldn't care if it's 64 or 32 megabytes, and would rather spend that money on the better camera. Where can you expand some of that thinking?
Yeah, I mean, so there are areas where you can make trade-offs, and there's others where you can't. So, for instance, even if we wanted to do 32, finding 32 meg parts these days in volume is very hard to do. So, I mean, many of those decisions get made for us as we look at part roadmaps going forward. I'm not saying that necessarily happened in this case, but we have to plan for the future. But we also want to make sure that when we give someone an MP3 story or a video story and so forth, it's not like, oh, you got one MP3, you're done. We really want to try and make that a little bit better, but not burden it with so much memory that it's like, okay, I'm being hit with that. Because this isn't a pure MP3 device, for example. In terms of some of those cost trade-offs, with the camera was one of those things where we said, hey, look, how are people using this? They're adding context to their contact lists. They are personalizing their wallpaper. They're doing some web logging and so forth. But they're not necessarily taking this as their only camera on a vacation. It's not meant to replace their digital camera, but it gives them decent low light performance so that they can use it for these light picture taking applications. I would say the only thing that is lesser than the 700p is the network bandwidth and the camera. Other than that, I would say much of the software is shared between the two devices, and we've actually got some newer applications. So I think there will be quite a few 650 people that will upgrade, as well as the new demographic. Because for a 650 user, this is a great upgrade.
I got a softball question. Why'd you get rid of the reset hole?
Because we shouldn't need it.
Yeah, okay.
Is that going to make it more confusing for users when it does crash on them?
Oh.
What crashes?
I mean, as a user, I don't know if it's just generic that you take out the battery of a normal cell phone.
Well, it is redundant, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it is.
One of them will work.
It is redundant. We're not pushing, hey, it's got a QWERTY and it's got all these different buttons. We're pushing the fact that, hey, you can do eBay. Well, how do you do eBay at home? I've got a full keyboard, I've got a mouse, and I've got a monitor. Well, in this, you have a full keyboard. You are able to touch the screen or navigate through the screen, and you've got this large screen that you can work with. So we're sort of backing them into, I need a smartphone to be able to do that because I can't do that on my little key phone. Now, based on your question in terms of the form factor and so forth, many of the reasons why carriers will differentiate based on form factor is that's the only thing they can explain in 30 seconds. I mean, because that's really a very visible difference on a TV spot and so forth. But if you start getting a message that's like ours that we're going to, which is quite subtle, but when you think back, you're like, wow, that's really powerful. What I'm saying is the capability is what drives the form factor. Whereas many phones today, the form factor drives the capability.